Hey people, how's it going? Welcome back to Ground Zero Salem. I'm your humble and intrepid host, Patrick. Sunday morning. Easy like Sunday morning, who knows when this will debut. I have new editing software that I don't really know how to use, so it's kind of a learning curve. I also have new lights behind me, and a new mic. So if you have any feedback, positive or negative, I'd like to hear it. I got one of these blue Yeti mics that apparently is a good entry point for something sort of almost professional, although I just watched some YouTube video about how it's a toy, and apparently it was a big topic of discussion like 7 years ago, being the fact that I am a boomer and I don't know anything about anything, but hopefully it sounds a little bit better. I got a stack of CDs to talk about. After talking about these and filing them, I won't have any to file or to talk about on my channel stuff. I actually been following change of the year, New Year's resolution goals, and not been wasting too much money. So that's good, right? I also have some tapes from the tape trade from Costa Rica, courtesy of Mario, that I'll be getting into. So that should be cool. And yeah, that's about it. Got a whole bunch of stuff. I took notes. This is what I do for you folks. I take notes so I actually know what I'm talking about. I can actually remember to tell you the label and year that this stuff came out. Only been doing this for 4 years now, whatever it's been. All right. Professionalism. Let's get into it. So, kind of a mixed bag. I got some stuff from Central and South America, but also other parts of the world. This is a tape that features a split on one side and an album on the other, dubbed for me by Mario. It's Writhing and Odd Patras with Tractor Off on the other side. Writhing is from Detroit. Odd Patras is from France. This is relatively recent brutal death metal. The Writhing came out in 2012. The Odd Patras came out in 2010, I think, and they just decided to throw them together. Probably two demos. They decided to do a split. Both are brutal death metal. The Writhing stuff has some kind of harsh, almost melodic parts that bring to mind second wave black metal, but it's got a lot of the trappings of brutal death metal as well. And the Odd Patras stuff is more or less just really well played brutal DM with some pretty heavy breakdowns. Tractor Off is something else entirely. Band from Croatia. I just took a look at their Metal Archives page. They have a lot of tractor themed stuff. They're kind of a thrash metal band, kind of crossovery, but elements of black metal too. And they also kind of travel down some weird paths. They have like boogie rock and bluesy parts. Really, really interesting stuff. Not like anything I've come across recently. Just kind of intentionally weird, you know? But being that they're from kind of a different place, it doesn't come off as forced. It just comes off as odd. That's their logo. Tractor Off. Then we got some Equinox demos. Ben Smasher introduced me to these guys a couple of years ago. Possibly the biggest hidden gem of the Florida death metal scene. The most underrated band, probably, from that. And I had all this stuff on a CD, like a collection, but it's nice to have like the original artwork. This is a promo from, I think, 93, yeah, promo 93. And then this demo, Come Forth the Haunting, Divine Ascension, Return to Mystery. This band, on these recordings, they're more or less, I'd say, like the kind of easier to digest side of Floridian death metal, like a little bit more towards the death or obituary kind of side of things. Not an overwhelming brutality or Morbid Angel or Deicide kind of sound. But there is a little bit of like black metal even on this stuff. And then further on, they get really more influenced by black metal in such a way. There's a lot of different ways to combine those two genres. And I mean, obviously in between the two, there's a lot of variation to begin with. But the way they combine it is so cool. They have that cold, like kind of sort of mayhem thing, combined with like death and obituary, and it works really well. But these demos are top shelf. You can get them both on a compilation that combines this and like, I think some comp tracks and some covers and stuff, and it's really cheap. I'll leave a link for their stuff. Then we got some Uruguay metal, probably the most well-known band from Uruguay, Grossby. This is the album Reincarnation and their demos. This was originally released on like a cassette not that long ago, like within the past couple of years. So Mario dubbed the tape for me. I actually found the Reincarnation album on CD. I'm not sure if it's legit or a boot, but I ordered that. That's the one thing I ordered recently. But Grossby, I would always see this on blogs and stuff like 10 years ago and thought it said Grafspree, like some e-space shit, like plutocracy. That's not what it says. Grossby was the name of a ship during World War II that was in Germany, and it centered around a certain battle. I don't remember. I didn't research that far, but there's also another band called Grossby that's German, spelled differently, probably correctly. Anyways, Grossby are incredibly noisy, necro-sounding, black kind of death metal stuff. It is really outside of a lot of my purview as far as explaining like what it sounds like. It's incredibly chaotic and noisy, and just kind of like just throbbing. Like there's a really, really loud, turned up red line to shit like bass throb, sort of bass recording on it that it takes a little getting used to, but once you get used to sort of the atmosphere it's creating, it's really rad. And it's just raw, primal, direct descendant of Venom and Celtic Frost, kind of early proto-black kind of sound to it. Early death metal as well. Very, very cool shit. Then you've got Morbid Blood and Inner Sanctum, 2-on-1 tape. Their demos. Morbid Blood stuff is not too far from the tree as far as Grossby goes. It's not nearly as noisy and blown out sounding, but it has that, would appeal to the death people who like the death demos, Possessed, early sadistic intent, early necrophagia, just chaotic, messy, noisy, obscure death metal type of shit. Fans of a lot of South American stuff too, obviously, would probably like it. And then Inner Sanctum, who are also from Uruguay. All these bands are from Uruguay that I've mentioned so far since Grossby. A band called Inner Sanctum that is really well executed Celtic Frost worship. Shadows in the Mirror demo of 1991. And Inner Sanctum did a fair amount of stuff. They even released an album, I think, sometime in the 2010s, 2015, something like that. Got back together. But this is really impressive, well done Celtic Frost sounding stuff. Sounds a lot like Celtic Frost. I mean, they're really going for a thing, obviously. And then you've got the Morbid Blood. This is Necromental Storm, which is their first demo. They did some other stuff as well, it looks like. Can't remember if they did a proper full-length or not. I think they did at least officially an EP or something, but a couple other demos and rehearsals and stuff like that. I think a split or two. So, interesting shit. Then, once I get this put away, Nosferatos Ventum and Ferrum de Tenebrae. Russian brutal death metal, and very, very competent brutal death metal. Nothing really too outside of what you would hear from like the Long Island classic bands or California or Discogs or anything like that. Really good. I mean, it's got all the climbs. People into the early Internal Bleeding and early Suffocation stuff won't be disappointed. Those really punchy, very present, throbbing bass kind of tones. That kind of shit. Very guttural vocals, of course. Much more so than my pathetic attempt at that just now. Great shit. And then Cabra Negra, band from Colombia. Great, nasty, slightly tongue-in-cheek, it seems like, black thrash stuff. A little bit on the Teutonic side, a little bit on the Venom worshipping side, but still very black metal. Right in the pocket for stuff that I enjoy. And in a similar vein, we have Gura Total, if I'm not fucking up that pronunciation with my Caucasianness. No left, no right, just zombies in the night. I guess that's supposed to be, that's like a political thing. Like, hey man, we're just here to throw our horns up and be metal. We don't have a partisan bias when it comes to singing about the nuclear condor division. Again, thrashy, black metal kind of stuff, very bullet belt and patch vest, big aviator sunglasses style shit. I kind of make up little jokes to myself, and I was like, is this centrist metal? Is that going to be a new thing? Centrist metal? No bunch of bad jokes in my head popped up. Pro-choice, yet pro-death penalty. Centrist metal. Legal weed and transphobia centrist metal. Defunding the EPA and law enforcement reform centrist metal. Pro-corporate personhood and anti-bump stock ban centrist metal. I like the idea of, of course there's the whole, who cares? This should just be pure fantasy, escapism, which we need right now, of course. I'm fine with that being the default setting for most metal, but the idea of centrist metal is pretty fucking funny to me. Alright, so let's get into some CDs. Just got these, repurchased these. I'm finally rounding the corner with, rebuying everything that I've gotten rid of over the past, 15 years. There's not too much stuff I need to track down again. Young and foolish, and also losing stuff and moves, of which there were many over the years. This is the Articles of Faith, Volume 1 and Volume 2 complete sessions. Came out on Alternative Tentacles. I remember buying these right when I moved back to Syracuse from Maine, so 2001 or 2, I think they came out. I'd never heard of these guys at the time. Right around that time in the early 2000s, that American Hardcore book came out, which the internet and the way info was flowing from that was really starting to blow up with message boards and broadband and what have you. And a lot of people were starting to explore second and third and fourth tier hardcore globally, and also discovering a lot of stuff that was, I think, mostly local scene stuff at the time. Articles of Faith, I don't know if they toured extensively. I never heard about them as part of my starter pack stuff, discovering bands like Black Flag and Dead Kennedys in the late 80s into the 90s. It wasn't stuff that you would just see, in the back of Thrasher, advertised in the Sessions t-shirt ads like I used to discover bands through. Articles of Faith were from Chicago, and yeah, this was the first I'd heard of them when this was reissued, and it's very, very good. Really technically and musically adept hardcore punk without being really metal at all. In a weird way, I kind of lumped them in mentally with that band Scream from DC. That was David Grohl's first band, where it's just interesting noodly parts, and they'd obviously listen to a fair amount of music outside of what was directly influencing their fast raging hardcore punk type of shit, probably some reggae, maybe even some prog and stuff like that. There's just weird riff choices, note choices in it. On the stuff that's on Volume 2, 83 to 85, they start to slow things down a little bit, slightly. There's some quieter moments and stuff like that. It's not all breakneck speed all the way through, but it's all very good. It's weird how it simultaneously can be American hardcore and fast, and also be sort of post-punk as well, which seemed to be a thing with Chicago. You had Naked Raygun and the Effigies, who also took a lot of inspiration from not only the latter-day hardcore scene at the time, but the stuff that came after the initial punk wave, like Wire and Joy Division, Gang of Four, stuff like that. You can definitely hear that in all the Chicago bands, I feel like. Even though Articles of Faith and the Effigies apparently hated each other, I don't think they got along with Naked Raygun either. These guys were a lot more far left politically, whereas the Effigies guys were kind of into the pseudo-patriotic skinhead kind of thing. So there was beef there, I guess. But I like all the bands mentioned just now by myself. And Articles of Faith are a nice band to catch back up with. So that's great. I've got just a whole bunch of stuff from a couple of lots on eBay and a few things that I picked up on Discogs. So I'll just jump into those. This is Disforia. This band was from Italy. A lot of this stuff is early 2000s. This is a self-released issue of their debut LP, although it's very short. It might as well be EP length. On Meat Grinder Records. It says right there in the back, fuck pop punk. Jason Hook is triggered. This is a CDR, so, put out themselves. And this is pretty raging crust stuff. It's all in Italian. And it reminds me a lot of Doom it has a certain recording quality with the drums that's very, like, it sounds like a locomotive going off the rails. The bass drum is, like, super booming and kind of trash canish and just awesome. Like, because there's a lot of that sort of D-beat sort of stuff that goes along with this rhythmically, but also, like, the guy's kind of, like, peppering it with double bass in there, and it sounds like a lot of, like, sort of a Motorhead meets kind of Crust sort of thing. Really good. Sounds like a charging bull. Rad. Then we've got Ausgebombt, who are a Portland band from the early 2000s. What did I order from the guy? I ordered from the guy who used to run this label, Hardcore Holocaust, and I ordered like one CD and one LP, and he sent me 3 extra CDs. He's apparently sitting on a lot of dead stock, but I liked everything that label put out. They didn't put out anything bad in the early 2000s, and they put out a lot of good Crust stuff. This band is, crusty hardcore, of course, as you can imagine. Ausgebombt being the name of a Sodom song, probably where they got it from, considering that they're not German. They're from Portland. And it's like slightly thrashy, speed metal-y kind of Crust stuff, straightforward, fast, D-beatish kind of rhythms. Clean vocals, though, like not so much in the like growly, death metal-y kind of vocals. In some ways, it kind of harkens a little bit to American hardcore from the West Coast that was influenced by British stuff more than what was going on in America. Like, I'm thinking like Final Conflict and Crucifix, maybe even a few other bands of that ilk that aren't coming to mind right now. But yeah, that kind of stuff, that's gonna drive me crazy that I can't think of that third band. What are you gonna do? Also on Hardcore Holocaust, you've got God damn it, they're Finnish. Viimeinen Kolonna with Ervikuva. Also raging fast hardcore. This is, it has a lot of Finnish influence, all the big name Finnish bands kind of come to mind. Rosetta and Tervit Cadet and everything like that, but their sound's a little bit more cleaned up, where it almost reminds me of like UK hardcore and punk at its tightest. Discharge, Verukers, Exploited. It has a certain kind of like anthemic sort of bouncy thing going on that I really like, but it has the speed and intensity of Scandinavian hardcore. It's a lot like kind of more faster and hardcore than the aforementioned bands. Anti-System's another one. I got to pick some stuff up by Anti-System. I just started checking them out recently. Then we've got Homomilitia from Poland. This is their second album, self-titled. It was recorded in 2000, I think, or 2001, and just put out last year, just kind of sitting on a shelf for a couple of decades. I really like this band's debut when it came out. I haven't heard it since the late 90s. This is awesome, raging fast hardcore with like a really thick, heavy death metal guitar tone. It's very close to Bolt Thrower. And when they're not going through kind of raging European style hardcore fast parts, they're doing really, really awesome like Bolt Thrower heavy breakdowns. Kind of trade-off vocals, male and female. Really fucking good stuff, all in Polish. Their debut is really good too. From what I remember of it, I remember it being fast and crusty, but I don't remember if they had the heavy kind of Bolt Thrower thing or not. I need to go back to it. It's been decades since I've heard it. This came out on the Polish label Nick Naiwe, which I'm sure I'm destroying pronunciation-wise. Alright, so now we have some Funeral Doom. Are you ready to be crushed under the spiked heel of despondency? Yeah, you little sad boy. Anyways, got you this to talk about Skepticism Stormcrow Fleet, a classic of the genre. Getting reacquainted with it, had it downloaded like 10 years ago. Very, very, very desperate, crushing Funeral Doom. Not really much else to say than that. Like definitely a cornerstone of the genre. Really good synth work. Really awesome crawling doom riffs that you could definitely hear what they're a direct descendant of, like the classics of doom metal that came before them from other doom metal genres. You could probably trace it back to the Peaceville stuff and St. Vitus and all that, but they're just turning it up to 11 as far as the misery goes, keeping in the tradition of fellow Finns like Thurgothen and stuff like that. Just awesome. The synth work really, especially how it builds up and kind of gets you ready for the rest of the record on the first track. Really, really does something for you. Then we have a recent one, Mournful Congregation, The Incubus of Karma, on 20 Buck Spin. Came out 3 years ago now. Came out in 2018. Australian guys, I love this band. So good. Just the melodies that they employ, those super melancholic leads and everything, the crushing riffs that just kind of hang in the air. It's hard for me to listen to stuff that has really long songs often. Not that much stuff really hits me the way, like, say, like some of the classics of the genre that I love, like Heaven Turns to Ash by Warhorse or Forest of Equilibrium by Cathedral. I don't think either are considered funeral doom, but whatever. Heavy doom metal stuff that's on par with death metal heaviness, I guess. Whatever. Mournful Congregation really does it for me. This band is fucking incredible. And I mean, really getting into like hashtag funeral doom, trademark TM type of stuff, I'm pretty new with. Like, these are two of the CDs in my collection that actually qualify as that. So I like Thurgothan and Disembowelment, but I guess those are considered proto. I don't know. I don't know a lot about this type of stuff. I just like what I like as far as various doom subgenres go. So great shit. Then we've got Cremation from the Netherlands. So this was reissued by Vic Records about 4 or 5 years ago, 2016. Death metal band from the Netherlands. Super catchy, melodic but not melodeath. Like, does remind me of what would pave the way for melodeath, proto-melodeath, if you will. Heartwork by Carcass, Death Human, stuff like that. Not as kind of like wanky in terms of like showing off their technical prowess, but they have the riffs that occasionally just are like, wow, it's probably really hard to play, but kind of maintaining it all to have just really good songwriting. Great death metal vocals that are guttural. I feel like there's almost like a Dutch style, you know what I mean? Like growly and guttural, but a couple of words are decipherable right there, here and there, and it feels like very of the throat, but kind of nasally too. It's like trying to force, like, you know, a ferret through your maxillary sinus. When I think of like Sinister and Gorefest, I think of a certain style of vocal, and Cremation, I feel, has that too. Maybe I'm imagining it. I don't know. Regardless, Retaliation's an awesome record. Vic put this out. They've got a ton of bonus tracks from other releases, it looks like, at the end. Super catchy Dutch death metal. Sort of in a similar vein, you've got D.A.R.K from the Czech Republic. This is a reissue on the Crypt. Sex and Death. It also includes their demo, Zla Krev. They went from the demo where they had lyrics in their own native language to like lyrics in English on Sex and Death. Centrist metal. Anyway, yeah, really fucking good death metal. There is something I feel globally about this. There's something very specific to the area. I think of bands like Root and Master's Hammer, bands from Eastern Europe, Poland, Czech Republic, the Ukraine, that lean kind of towards that riffy black and death metal sort of thing. I feel like D.A.R.K is more of like a straight up death metal take on it, but there is just this sort of bizarre, uniquely of that area of the world sort of sound when it comes to just the twistiness of the riffs and the delivery of the vocals and everything. Kind of hard to exactly put my finger on, but it feels unique and it's catchy, you know, good riffs. It goes really, really well back to back with that Cremation record, which it has numerous times in the past few weeks for me. Going back to some hardcore stuff, we've got The State from Ann Arbor, Michigan. They put out the No Illusions EP in the early 80s. It's a hardcore classic. Maybe not the most well-regarded next to their state mates like The Fix and Negative Approach, of course, and the Necros, which is kind of a shame. They did a really, really good EP, that No Illusions EP, and then a follow-up LP that I haven't heard. I don't know if they kind of jumped the shark like a lot of hardcore bands of the day did. I'll have to listen to that. They came back in the 2000s, and I remember people being excited to hear the songs from the EP live, but kind of poo-pooing their new stuff. And I don't really know why, because It's All Wrong full length is awesome. It's just great American hardcore through sort of a discharge filter. If you like the early Poison Idea stuff before they got more like rock, it's certainly for you. Several, stuff like that. I mean, newer bands like Long Knife, all that type of shit. Gnarly, deep vocaled, kind of like harsh guitar tone wise, like a little on the trebly harsh kind of sound. You could even say, if you like some of the Boston stuff, like some of the meaner Boston stuff like SSD, this would appeal to you too. It's a great record. All Wrong by the State. Put up by, I don't know who. Underestimated Records out of Chicago, 2006. Then, a couple more things from Mario, CDs here. This is Punto Conflictivo, Falsa Conciencia. This band is from Costa Rica. They're like a leftist political hardcore band. Cool twists and turns musically. I mean, there's a lot of fast-raging hardcore. There's a lot of like what reminds me of like 90s noisy post-hardcore here and there. There's a cool instrumental at the end entitled Angustia that has like this cool, I can't even figure out exactly what it is. I think it's some kind of keyboard, but it's like super catchy and kind of mystical sounding. Awesome stuff. Super raging. There's a couple songs that are kind of metal tinged too, but not death or thrash metal. Almost kind of like a traditional metal, new wave of British heavy metal kind of gallop on a few things here and there. It's good stuff. Then you've got Kolapzo Total. I tried to see exactly where these folks are from. I want to say that they're also from Costa Rica. I believe Mario told me that at some point, but if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Also, raging hardcore. Great DIY packaging. Spray paint and twine and cardboard. I remember an era where like this was almost the norm. A lot of stuff on Ebullition Records you'd get. Most of the time it was cool. Sometimes it was potentially hazardous, like the 7 Days of Samsara CD. Look it up. You get some lacerations from that bad boy. But this is a little bit more straightforward. This is like straightforward, kind of raging political hardcore punk stuff. Fast, simple riffs, to the point. Lyrics in Spanish. Got bullets, got an anarchy sign. Can't go wrong there. Then from Panama, you've got Aberrante, El Engendro. That's the thing with all this like international hardcore and metal stuff. Like, my pronunciations of this shit is so shameful, but what can you do? I listened to this and looked at the artwork and stuff, and I was like, oh, this band must be from the early 90s, but actually it's 3 demos from 2013, 2015, and 2016, respectively, and it's all like really primal death metal stuff. Blasts, but blasts that almost don't feel like blasts because they're metered at such a slow rate, but like that kind of shit. Super nasty. I mean, like, if you're in the market for some more stuff that appeals to Impetigo fanboys or really like the Autopsy demos and shit like that, this would be up your alley. Really awesome cover art too, taken from an H.P. Lovecraft short story, I believe. But tons of songs on it. Yeah, real evil, messy fucking death metal stuff. It's great. Then you've got Armagedom from Brazil. Outside of Olho Seco and, of course, Ratos de Parau, I think this is like the third most popular hardcore band, punk band from Brazil. Das Cinzas ao Inferno. Messed that up too bad. Like 3 different labels here. Oh, God. Terror Rotten's one of them. We'll just say that. This came out in the early 2000s, 2004, I think. And yeah, along the lines of also of kind of like, for an easy comparison, probably Doom. Gruff vocaled, slightly metallic. They go down into some tighter kind of like palm muting kind of chuggy stuff, but nothing gets super technical or like ripping off any like thrash metal riffing or anything like that. It's super primal crust shit. Pretty deep, hoarse kind of shouted, kind of growled sort of vocals. Great. Then we've got Fallas Del Sistema, Dignidad y Rebeldia. Rebeldia. Jesus Christ. It means dignity in rebellion. So, long-standing kind of anarcho-punk hardcore from Guadalajara, Mexico. Been around since 92. I think they're still around. And this reminds me of a period in the 90s where certain bands would kind of do a little bit of this and a little bit of that in the DIY scene. Certain bands would have like songs that were kind of anthemic and pogo punkish, and then they'd have songs that were bordering on crust and really fast, and some songs that sounded like early 80s American hardcore, like D.R.I, like proto blast beat style stuff. There's like ska, like that's kind of where this band's coming from. It's a kitchen sink kind of approach, but all of it's pretty cohesive at the end of the day, and it's keeps you guessing and it's fun to listen to. Then we've got the Swan Song from UK hardcore stalwarts Voorhees. Crystal Lake's Legacy came out on 6 Weeks Records in 2001. Great album. I didn't poo-poo it when it came out. I was just moving on to other things. Voorhees were a favorite band of mine for a couple of years. Spilling Blood Without Reason, the debut, and the split with Devoid of Faith are two favorites of mine. A bunch of 7 inches they did were great too. The Split Without Cold. They were a UK HC band that were that second generation after the initial wave of Heresy and Ripcord and bands like that were kind of taking a lot of inspiration from a lot of American stuff, particularly Boston hardcore. When this came out, I was just paying attention to other stuff and was like, oh, that's cool, I guess. But man, this record rips. They're not changing their sound at all. It's like raw US hardcore with a touch of UK influences. Super fast. I mean, Lecky, the vocalist, one of the best hardcore vocalists in that during the 90s at least. And just he's giving the performance of his career on this, I feel like. Just sounds like his voice box is going to jump out of his eye socket. It was super raw. And I mean, if he's singing over a metalcore record, he can do that really, really well too. There's a band called Withdrawn that's like kind of approaching sort of an integrity thing that he sang on, and I was impressed that his vocals went from raw, kind of negative approach-ish, kind of Boston hardcore-ish kind of stuff, worked equally well for like a metalcore band. He sounds like a human, but a human possessed, a fucking great vocalist. Lecky. Underrated. Then I got some stuff from Paragon, because I wanted to get that Ferretrum record. Paragon's a good little distro. A lot of deals on that, I found. I got the Ferretrum that I talked about last update, that band from Uruguay that I love so much. I liked it so much I wanted it on CD, on digital format. And I was like, I'll get some other stuff from that. I got the Skepticism, a few other things I'm going to talk about. And I was like, well, this seems like a no-brainer. It's called Hell Charger. It's called Black and Roll. Looks wicked generic. And look at this, like, you got the Discharge skulls and the Celtic Frost symbol, you got the speed metal sunwheel thing there on his forehead. Like, my kid watches these things on YouTube that are, I think they're algorithm generated, that it's just like, oh, we're going to combine the Teen Titans with Marvel superheroes, and they just kind of like merge them. That's exactly what this is with a lot of stuff I like. It's like, let's put this in the chamber from The Fly. The one booth has Discharge, the other one has Celtic Frost. It doesn't really sound like a direct combination of the two, but it's like Motorhead, Venomish kind of black thrash stuff, super primal and rumbly with kind of more almost kind of like second wave black metal vocals, kind of shrieky. And one other thing that's funny is I think they just meant to list their Facebook here, but it looks like there's a member of the band called Facebook, which is, should have maybe separated that by a line or put that somewhere else in the booklet, I guess. Then we've got Bestial Mockery, Gospel of the Insane. It's decent black thrash. I remember a lot of kind of buzz around these dudes like 10 years ago. It's fun. It's not really on the same level as Niflheim or R Noir or Disaster or any of the other big names for black thrash, but it is cool, like kind of punky black metal, with kind of a early Teutonic kind of bent to it, Motorhead and Venom influences. Start to play bingo with how many times I said Motorhead and Venom influences in this update. Then we've got Excruciation, Prophecy of Immortality. This is a Crypt reissue. Swiss band. I think talked about these guys a while ago. The Crypt also reissued their Last Judgment EP. Weird, obscure Swiss metal, kind of fits right along with Celtic Frost and Samael in terms of just a dense fog of like fucking mystic weirdness around it. I don't know what it is about that country. They were basically a thrash band, but they just had odd choices as far as songwriting goes, and it feels kind of otherworldly. And on this one, they get it's technically a demo, but it's album length. They get kind of more doomy on this and strange, which I enjoy. And also, one thing that's cool that a good reissue label will do, and the Crypt is one of the best. There's a remixed and remastered version on CD1, and then the original mix on CD2, which is always nice. Then from Lima, Peru, you have Dios Hastio with one of the best album titles I've heard in a while, Cervix Inferno. Another one I used to have back in the day, but I remember being so weirded out by the general sound of it, I couldn't wrap my head around it. That was probably 2000 or 2001 or so. This band's awesome. Again, like very strange aura around it. Interesting, like quiet guitars on some recordings. This is a compilation of different 7 inches and other releases thrown on one. Long-standing Peruvian band too, but yeah, it's crust. It's somewhat metallic as far as like the heaviness goes. Some of the riffs are kind of thrashy or death metal-y, but for the most part, like firmly in like a hardcore punk crust kind of thing. The sort of drumming approach is very odd. It feels very off and weird. I suggest it for like people that are into like strange like raw black metal stuff, even though it's definitely not black metal. It has a similar kind of atmosphere to it, I think. Then Major Mistake, Foul Foundations. This band is Finnish. I believe this came out on Dismal Fate Records in 2019. Yeah, it's kind of got some HM2 stuff to it. It's sort of grind. It's sort of punk. Has some almost kind of like stoner rock or doom kind of heavy riffs on it. It's kind of all over the place. I'm not sure if it's really gelling with me quite yet. Jury's still out on it. But overall, not a bad listen. Then Pandemonium from Poland. This is Devilry. It's actually a compilation of the Devilry EP and then promos, rehearsals, some live recordings, some other shit. Great Polish band. Again, air of like mysticism and weirdness around it. Certainly if you like early Samael and the Greek stuff, this is probably up your alley. Although I feel like it's a little bit more on the death metal side than black, a little bit more growly and riffy. Their full length is awesome too, which was reissued by the Crypt. That record's fantastic. Great band, Pandemonium. One tape that I got in trade, I think with Mario a couple of years ago, the last trade I did with him, and I was like, man, I gotta track that down on a digital format. Then Holding On, Minneapolis hardcore from the early 2000s. This is just a compilation of all their singles and comp songs, kind of firmly between Youth Crew and stuff that was a little bit more 80s, mid-80s kind of thrashy hardcore, like Tear It Up. This was during that whole era of Y2K thrash, hardcore thrash, not metal thrash. Nine Shocks Terror, Tear It Up, all that kind of stuff. Good band, catchy shit. Just Another Day, their full length on Havoc is really, really good, from what I remember. Then Rosetta Stone. I picked this up again because I needed to hear it. It had been a long time, since the 90s, since I heard it. I remember it being a total Sisters of Mercy clone. I mean, look at that logo. But it actually, I feel like Cleopatra Records at that time had a lot of bands that were cribbing heavily from Andrew Eldritch and co. This certainly does sound a lot like Sisters of Mercy, but it also reminds me of The Mission. So, some of the same people. I think it's mostly the vocals. The vocals are a lot more cleaner, not as deep, not as reverberating, and dramatic. They almost are a little bit more commercial, like a little more towards like, I don't know, like Depeche Mode or something like that. But yeah, it's good death rock, goth kind of stuff. I already talked about this, but this is the CD reissue of Gizm Detestation that came out on Relapse. Had to have it. I don't know why they put an Obi strip, printed it on the cover. Like, okay. Yeah, people complaining about the mix of this, saying it's too quiet, but it is like a lot more of the instrumentation's more audible to me, so turn it up. Classic Japanese metal punk, garbled vocals, blazing leads, yeah, like heavy galloping metal, but with fucking Crass Records production. Came out and way ahead of its time. Check it, peep it. And then finally, Death for Retrum. This is just a CD issue of that tape that I talked about last time, and it came out on Death Thrash Armageddon, it looks like. Not sure when, but yeah, nice CD copy of this I picked up for $5 from Paragon Records. That nice distro out of New York. I want to say New York. So there we go. That's another update in the can. No particular plans for anything right now. I know I said I was going to bring back Subgenre Wars. I'm just trying to think of what I want to do. There's a dangerous chance that one of those is going to be ska. I'm warning you right now. I mean, be careful what you wish for. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up.